Grassroots is brought to you by Work It, meeting the needs of entrepreneurs in Stillwater since 2017. Welcome to Grassroots, a podcast series for growing civic engagement through conversation. I'm Chris Peters.
And I'm Michelle Charles, and we're your hosts for this series.
Here is part 3 of our conversation with Marc Trotter, candidate for Mayor of Stillwater. I think we've done a good job throughout all this of kind of getting to the why you want to serve, but maybe getting into the how. How do you think, as being mayor, you would, within yourself, like, serve the community?
Well, I share the opinion of James Madison in that the proper role of the government is to secure your rights and secure your property. So really, I think the best way I can serve you as individuals and as a community is to essentially secure your individual rights and liberties within the confines of your home and within our city and within our public property and all of that. That's really, and then we've got to, as you pointed out earlier, with zoning issues, there's more to think about. It's an interesting conversation, and it really kind of comes down to how does this affect everybody? How are we considering everybody's situations? How are we serving them best? How am I, for lack of better words, how can I love them the best way possible? And so, I mean, that's how I view it. I'm like, if becoming mayor, I'm not stepping up to a seat above people. As the way I see it, I'm actually stepping down to now I'm all of your servants. I'm your servant.
Everybody's your
Everybody
boss.
in Stillwater is here to be served, right? Like, I'm here to serve you. And that's a huge sacrifice for someone who is an Enneagram 5 wing 6.
I can see where it's going to be a challenge, and you're going to have to find ways to refill that tank.
And create the right boundaries, you know.
Right.
Allocate, that's not a word. Allocate time to disengage and recharge, and then be really the best servant I can be.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, obviously, the mayor is 1 vote of 5 on the city council. So, I mean, you know, they do things, they sign a lot of documents, and they do run the meetings, and they do have a certain, I mean, they become the face of the city.
Yeah.
For a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when dignitaries come to town, they want to meet the mayor.
Yeah.
You know, when there's a certificate or a resolution
photo op.
Yeah, you know, when it's, you know, National Dog Trainers Month or whatever, you know, you're going to do that. You know, proclamation, you know, then you're going to stand there and do the grip and grin photo with them. You know, I mean, that's how it is. But having said that, there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah.
I mean, as a member of the city council, as a working body that governs our city, what do you think the priorities should be? I mean, I know, you know, obviously securing liberty, you know, and people's property rights. How do you think our city can move forward? What would you like to see? Are there any special projects? Anything that you think really need to be focused on?
Or things we should not be doing.
Yeah,
maybe.
Things we should leave alone.
Yeah.
1 second, I'll ask for specifics in a second.
Sure.
So, I mean, really, it all comes from that place of how best can I serve the individuals, right? How can I protect your liberties? How can I protect your liberties? The way I see it, we are a nation of kings, okay?
Okay.
You're a king, I'm a king. We're all kings. No king can tell another king what they can or cannot do. All authority is delegated, not surrendered.
Okay.
Now, what if the king next door to me and I disagree?
Well, then and that's where I get involved.
I want
basically
my chariot needs a 5-lane road.
Yeah.
But
it's got to go through your kingdom.
House
that's right.
Is in my way from widening that road. Now, we're saying this is actually a true thing right now because
True story.
I mean, I'm not, like, we're not kings or queens here, but
no.
But in this instance, like Michelle lives on a road that is planned for a future widening that would pretty much put the road straight up against her house and her property. So, this is her property, right? You're securing property rights.
That's right.
But I don't want to be stuck in traffic for 10 minutes in the morning. I want that wider road, and the couple hundred people that also have to, or maybe more, well, maybe a couple hundred, also want this.
Yeah.
So, Michelle, sorry, we're going to buy up some of your property and add some lanes.
Is this a Mr. Spock moment? The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? What is it? I mean,
first off, I always want to consider all the information. Okay, I want to set my opinions aside and separate from them, right? This is a supposed skill and gift of fives. They're supposedly good at separating and really just looking at it in the most objective way possible. That's something that has been likened to them over time. But once you consider all the facts, right? And I don't know what the facts of this story are. But let's say we've considered all the facts. I consider things like eminent domain criminal.
Okay.
That's theft. The needs of the many do not outweigh the needs of the few on their property.
Okay.
They're a king still. And particularly in a nation such as ours, that's the whole point. It's not a mob rule. It's a protection of each individual and therefore a protection of society as a whole.
Okay.
Now, every situation, it kind of depends. Like when we start getting presented with different things, well, we got to honestly consider everything. But on the simple front, usually my starting point would be like, well, eminent domain is not legal in my opinion. Or not right in the very least. Because now it's just a bunch of people saying, well, this is, we're sacrificing your property on the altar of our convenience. Thank you for your service. Well,
here's some money. Like, you're going to get paid.
So here, maybe, like maybe not what you would have wanted, or maybe there's sentimental value attached to it. These things you can't really fully consider. Well, this was grandma's house, or even if it wasn't. Well, I wanted to rent this property out. I wanted to make something better in my life.
Or you just want to have a safe neighborhood, and you don't want to have all this traffic and noise, and I want to be able to walk across the street without needing a signal to just cross the road.
Right.
Well, and that's just it. And I still want to consider everything. I still want to consider the other group's side. I need to. It's important to. You have to consider everybody's perspective. That's part of it, But I can't pull myself away from this duty, this sincere need to protect your individual property, your individual rights. That still tends to be the highest, right? But I want to consider all that data. That's important. It matters, There's a balancing act. We are a community, so there's that too.
We're not all in our own kingdoms.
That's right.
We gotta leave our little kingdom and travel through other kingdoms.
Exactly. I mean, seriously, and
that's why Europe spent several hundred years at war, in constant war. I mean, because there's just a bunch of little kingdoms next to each other, and everybody just, But so having said that, I mean, you mentioned data, and of course that analytical, side of you. It sounds like you probably like data. You like looking at,
I like to see
underpinnings.
The facts.
You want to see the facts. You want to see the numbers. You want to see the specifics of that.
Consider long term.
Okay. Okay. So then long term, I mean, moving into what direction do you think our city should be heading? Do you think it's in the right direction? And are there priorities that you would like to see addressed that aren't being, or things that are being that you think should go away? What do you think? Or maybe less emphasis?
Well, I mean, obviously, security of your rights is my number one. And then when we start getting into city business, roads, right? Mm-hmm. I want to breathe a voice into really how can we reconsider how we're managing the people's money, and then perhaps there's a way. I might be wrong, and it's a dialogue. I'm also trying to seek info from the fellow counselors.
Nobody's expecting you to come in like, here's the magic idea.
Boom,
this is how we can afford
plan
to fix everything.
Yeah,
Well, I will tell you this. The one thing I've heard from every person who has ever gotten on city council.
Roads.
Well, not only that. I mean, they all come in roads and economic development are two of the things that everybody wants to talk about because that's what they get hammered on constantly. That and a target. But the three magic things. But once they take office, they just get this kind of shell-shocked look because suddenly they are realizing exactly how much they didn't know.
Yep.
And it's always that proverbial drinking from a fire hose.
Oh yeah. And see, that's why I don't tell people for instance, like I don't want to say I'm definitely going to fix all of the roads. I'm like I don't have enough data to know that. I haven't sat down with the city manager and deliberated or the council. The reality is they know all that data they've interacted with it more than I have.
Sure.
There's a lot to know, so maybe they don't know all of it, and that's totally understandable. I don't. And so the reality is you sit down and you strategize together. And so in an ideal world, yes, all the roads get fixed. Yes, I want to add more sidewalks, and that's my goal. That's my intent. More roads, better roads, long-term roads, even if it's you just but somehow find a way to save while doing that. And then, my theory is, what's the first thing you notice when you drive into a town? Mm-hmm. Your roads. Sure. You drive in, and all of a sudden, your car's either a smooth ride or it is bouncing like crazy, and you're like, oh my gosh. It's like, that's the first thing you notice. How can you expect people... that's their first impression, I think. It tends to be one of my first impressions. Wow, this town has really nice roads, right? And it's like,
do you feel like that means it's a well-run town? Or a well-kept town?
Just gives a good
that's
impression.
Probably just a first impression that people think.
Right.
I'm not saying it means that.
Sure, but I mean saying, to people like it reads that way.
I think to people, and I suspect, I know for me, without meaning to, it tends to read that way. And I'm thinking, okay, if this is their first impression and we make the roads nicer, we allocate some of the resources back to that, maybe we'll get more people to move in. Maybe we'll convince those businesses that building downtown is a good idea because now we're taking care of their the property around their property, right? Mm-hmm. Now we're telling them, we're sending a message like, we care, and you do too, right? You should, right? And so it hopefully stimulates those types of things to occur, and I hope that we can find ways to structure the budget in such a way that we don't have to keep raising rates on things, at least not unreasonably. Obviously you always have to if they're inflation, as long as inflation's a thing. But just breathing life into the voice of, well, is there a way we could cut some costs here? Nothing that's too drastic or damaging, but like, is there a way? Is this an option? Have we considered this? Mm-hmm. I'm hearing these conversations about like we have to raise the 50-cent transportation tax to a full cent. Yeah. I'm like, well, okay, maybe.
Well,
okay.
Let's talk about that because that's going to be on the same ballot that your name's going to be on.
Right.
And how we pay for things around here is with sales tax.
Yeah.
So adding on that additional 50 cent is supposed to increase that from an average of $4 million a year to $8 million a year, and used for maintenance, not capital.
That's right.
Not new
repair of existing.
Well.
Ooh, Michelle.
Well.
Okay. What this is doing is this is actually repealing the existing 50-cent sales tax, which was very narrowly focused on maintenance.
Oh, okay.
But and replacing it with a full cent sales tax, which would not have quite as many restrictions, so therefore they could use it for a few, still within transportation,
right?
Still within that, but they would not be quite as handcuffed in terms of
So
the types of projects that they could use it
to add some sidewalks, connect the sidewalks to
transportation
nowhere rather than just resurfacing roads.
Transportation in general, yes.
Okay.
It wouldn't just be doing like the micro resurfacing or filling cracks and things like that, that are part of the pavement management program.
Yeah.
But it would also be, every kind of transportation, whether it's bike trails or sidewalks or whatever. Because one thing I've seen over the years, again, and that the city has very much started to acknowledge, is that it's not a very accessible city. And if you're not in a car, it's not very easy to get around. And if you are in a wheelchair or a scooter or something like that, good luck, buddy.
You said if you are?
If you are.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Good luck getting across some streets.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the most interesting person to really listen to at the city council meeting, when you're just like, oh, why are the roads this way? Try to pay attention to Monty Carnes, the city engineer.
Yep.
And he every time he talks, he reminds me of a Bilbo Baggins talking about being a thin amount of butter spread over too much toast. You're taking. He's like, I've only got this much money, but I've got, if you gave me enough butter, I need like $60-something million of it. I could go through there and make every road
beautiful,
increase the level of service and all that stuff. But I've only got $4 million of butter.
Right. And yeah, actually, I really enjoy listening to all the city officials, Monty Carnes and these other guys come up and present, because it's very, this is their job. This is what they do.
Yeah.
It's
Ideally,
really
they're the most
interesting.
knowledgeable person in town.
They really are,
that.
Right.
And the reality is, regardless of if I'm up there or not, it's like, okay, you tell me what you think, and now I have to deliberate on it with the other voices of the city, and then we decide together what the right choice is. And the reality is, you just don't know what you don't know, And so I'm thinking, like, I would like to consider ways to not have to raise taxes. Sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah.
It really is sometimes. Like, for instance, what was it, 1979 with the, I can't remember how much of a cent tax for the Kaw water line
okay.
bond issue or whatever it was, sales tax.
It was a bond.
Okay, it was a bond. Okay, I couldn't remember. Yeah. You need water.
Boy, don't you.
Yeah, if you're going to have a growing city.
Don't want to be Flint, Michigan.
Right?
Don't want that to happen.
Boomer Lake is not enough of a supply.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And it turns out that was a great investment, because during the drought several years ago, when there were cities that were having to ration water, we had a plentiful supply and were able to help people around the region.
Yeah.
All those people who were running out of water, guess who they were getting their water from? Us.
And Stillwater got to be that kind of, for lack of better words, the city on a hill there.
Right.
We were able to serve other communities.
Right.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And so it's like, yes, my initial starting place is lower taxes, all that stuff, the whatever. But it's like, okay, I don't want to walk in there, though, and not consider everything.
You're not just like an automatic, you're not an automatic no vote on something or a yes vote on something.
You've got to consider all the facts. I frankly, it's not
serving everybody.
It's not well, yeah, that's right. That's not really the right way to serve you. You have to consider all the facts. You have to consider all the data. You have to properly weigh it out and say, okay, well, yeah, I have my opinion, but well, shoot, this isn't going to work.
Yeah. And sometimes you
sorry, guys.
Where, how it works is, city staff is up there. They present their thing. This is the options. And then what's the recommendation from city staff? Like, it's kind of funny when they ask, what does city staff recommend?
Yeah.
They don't, I've never seen them like say, hey, don't do the plan or don't follow planning commission's recommendation or anything.
Well,
like
these
that.
are the people who've spent a lot of time
they're studying
developing this presentation.
Yeah.
They're the ones who generated the information that led to the recommendation in the first place.
And then
so
sometimes,
obviously, But the city council can send them back to the drawing board,
Exactly.
and
See,
I've
that's
seen
the
them do
thing.
it
'Cause you could
over
say,
and over.
That's the thing.
This is not clicking,
yeah.
or there's got to be more information, or you're getting emails from the community, other professional engineers in town that say, hey, man, they want to go and do that road, and they say it costs this much money, but, I think it should only cost. I mean, you're going to get a whole lot of information, and you gotta weigh that out. But that information, that doesn't necessarily come to the public meeting.
Right.
But watching enough, you hear the city councilors ask a question, and that question wasn't originally in their head, but they got it from somebody else, and they're asking for somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's the cool thing. That's one of the cool things about this. We've got 5 counselors, and we've all got different people who are trying to feed us information, or maybe not feed, open our eyes to other options, right?
Sure.
Or consider different things, or
Right.
if you do this might happen, or if you don't do this, that might happen. And it's like, that's the interesting thing. Y'all go up there, and as long as we just walk in with an open mind, we're like, okay, let's consider the data. The cool thing about all of that is, like you said, sometimes if staff come up and present something, we could say, that's a great report. I'd like to consider this instead. Can you focus your energy on this? Mm-hmm. Maybe you can reroute something else. Maybe you haven't thought about it. I know, like with my wife and I's budget, anytime we sit down and discuss it, there's always things you can tighten up 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. You're talking not that much money you're living off of. You can imagine the independent 2 people living in a house type of budget. They're probably all fairly similar when it comes to your needs and necessities. I suppose, generally
how much
speaking,
of our coffee budget do we really need?
Exactly. That is actually a conversation we've had. How much are we actually going to allocate?
Mark
to
rolled in
holdings?
with a coffee this morning, so I already knew that. Was
Yeah.
But you think about all those.
You
things.
have to, and so the reality is, it's like, well, you're working as a team. My wife and I are a team. We both have different perspectives on how the budget probably should go, and then we present to each other, and we're like, oh, I'd never thought of it that way. Mm-hmm. Interesting. I just learned from you. Thank you.
Right.
Now we're both together going to find that better
path forward, and
that's with our own personal low dollar budget, comparatively speaking. And then you're looking at a city budget over $100 million, and it's like, there's surely there's things that are happening, and you never know. And I trust the team, the management is doing a good job of keeping it under wraps. That's not the right word. Under budget, where it needs to be. That's what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
But the reality is, it's still a good question to ask. It's important to ask. Have you considered this? Oh, I had this idea, or oh, this citizen put this thought in my head. And now I want to ask you, have you considered? The reality is, we're not meant to operate as an island. I don't have all the answers. Monty Carnes doesn't have all the answers. None of us do. And so, that's why we got to conversate about it, got to deliberate on it, consider all the options, Mm-hmm. You can always learn something.
Okay. You've thought quite a bit about city government and how it works and how it maybe shouldn't work, and you've interacted with it, this last couple of years, obviously, in a way that maybe you hadn't before, and a lot of people don't ever.
Yeah. Very uncomfortable.
Well, yeah. So what made
nervous.
you decide, I should be the guy sitting up there? I want to be one of those people up there listening to people tell me that I'm ruining their lives.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
And well, no, not just that, but also people who are just saying, please, consider this.
Yeah.
This is important to me, knowing that you're making these important decisions. But at the same time, you have all these constraints and these other factors to consider. I mean, that's a big challenge. And then also you've said you kind of like your quiet time.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you become a public figure, and you can't go to Walmart or somewhere and someone's going to go, hey, by the way, about that thing.
Yeah.
It just happens. So what made you decide that you were willing to make that investment of your time and energy?
Well, the initial catalyst, of course, was March of 2020. You know, the shutdowns, the that stuff, the idea of essential and non-essential businesses, all these things that are contrary to, well, at least my perspectives, and you know, over time, you're trying to communicate, and you're learning how to communicate better what you're trying to say, and eventually, I was like, nobody else is going to do it, are they? I'm the sucker that's going to have to do it. Okay, fine. I guess I will, you know. And so it was just like, I don't feel like I'm being properly represented. People who think like me aren't, and that's really not meant to be a bash at all. It's really not. But I'm like, I want to breathe a new voice in this. There's a different perspective here. And it may not always work. It might not. But it's a different one, and it's something to consider. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So, well, let's get straight to the point then. What role do you think as mayor and city councilor should have in public health? In the health of the community. So maybe tied to, like, you know, individual rights and stuff.
So I think the best way to capture this really is my starting point is a quote by Thomas Jefferson.
I knew you were going there.
We did.
I'm ready.
Sure did.
I'm ready.
I prefer a dangerous liberty over a peaceful slavery.
Okay.
That's my starting point.
Okay.
As James Madison said, I said earlier, the government's primary object is to protect your rights and your property. So when it comes to your individual lives, as far as I see it, I actually have no right to make you do anything with yourself.
Okay.
I have none. My duty is to protect your rights to make that choice.
So would you, and I like to, in my head, I kind of compare this pandemic that we've been going through to more like a war. So, you know, I think internally I'd be like, yeah, I don't want to be like automatically drafted and told I've got to go, you know, possibly go kill another human being to defend my country.
Yeah.
That's like, I'm a kind of passive person.
Yeah.
But
I tend to be too.
Yeah. But then at the same time, it's like, well, we've got a hospital here, a regional hospital, that's crying uncle. And how can we help them? And I think that's where at least some of like, at least my mindset was, okay, well then, yeah, we're not going to interact with other people. We're going to try to, you know, the quarantine thing. And a lot of people are still doing that, you know, obviously voluntarily.
Yeah.
I know of some people that, I mean, they didn't leave their house for like a year.
Yeah.
Yes. I know several people.
And whether that's they're actually afraid of getting sick or getting someone else sick, that's all individual choices, right? But as mayor and city council, you do actually have that legal power to try to mitigate maybe the stress on that system. Like if, you know, you're going to war and it's like, yeah, we've exhausted all of our young men.
Yeah.
All right, ladies, sign up.
Right.
I mean, no, I don't want that. I want to prevent something that prevents us from having to exhaust anybody.
So, I mean, yeah, that war analogy, I mean, you can look at it like a natural disaster. You can look at a war situation. I mean, but Chris, you know, touched on the idea of mitigation, you know, and I mean, I think the city council made the decision that in terms of what they saw as a looming public health crisis, at a point when we had very few tools to address it, right? And as he said, the hospital was crying
Not
uncle.
a lot of data.
Well, and not only that, but no vaccines available, no effective treatments for it. Basically, it was bring people in, put them on oxygen, hope for the best. If they get too bad, throw them on a ventilator, and pray they come off of it. And that's really where we were, you know, and that was honestly all we had at that point, and people were really, really scared, and they were afraid that the health system was going to collapse. So this was a situation we were in, and for whatever reason, I mean, based on the decisions that, the information they were getting, that was the decision they made. But I know it wasn't something that made anybody happy, and it had to be a tough decision. I agree. There's an advantage to having a diversity of perspectives. And one of the reasons that I'm glad you're running, and that I'm glad there is a race for mayor, is that it forces everybody to have these conversations.
Yeah.
It brings up issues that you would never discuss otherwise.
Yeah.
And I think that for people who might view you as part of an opposition, perhaps, to the sitting city council, I mean, if you look in other countries, there are established opposition parties.
Yeah.
And they serve a purpose.
Yeah.
The purpose is to bring that diversity of perspectives and say, hey, wait a minute, what about this? So that you don't have a group of like-minded people who just kind of steamroll along without actually looking at that. So, I mean, even knowing that if you get on the city council, that you might just be that lone voice crying in the wilderness. I mean,
have considered
what do you think?
that.
Have you considered that?
I have thought about that. When I first started going to the city council meetings, I want to make sure I catch your question.
Sure, no problem.
So don't let me get off that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I don't want these people to think I'm against them, because I'm not. We are neighbors, and that's something I think about. And I care about you.
So you're trying to separate the policies from the people?
Absolutely. I mean, even though that's so hard to do, politics is you're getting in people's business.
It is personal. The political is personal.
It can be personal, and I'm like, so as much as I can, and so far it's been totally doable. I can separate them and say, okay, well, that's a decision you made, and whether you stand by it or not, that just in my mind does not define you. It just doesn't. It can't. We have to communicate. We have to discuss. I can learn from you. You might learn from me. Maybe we'll learn together.
This is what we call civic engagement.
Right. That is what it's called.
Which is why we're sitting here right now.
Yeah. Good old-fashioned civic engagement.
That was my thing, too, is when I first started going, when I was more going on downtown issues and kind of more bicycle pedestrian advocacy and stuff, was, why is nobody here? Why are so many people complaining about these things, but they're not participating?
Right. Yeah.
And so, like, even you bring a group of people now that are participating in that process.
Oh, well, I mean,
you're along with.
We have, just so that there's multiple voices there.
And I'm not trying to say like bring like an organized group or anything like that.
Oh, yeah.
But bringing those perspectives.
Sure. Yeah.
And allowing other people to say, hey, that person has the same perspective I do. I should be paying attention more and all this stuff.
I think that was so they can see our face. I think that matters, I mean,
you become a person in the community.
It's personal, Oh, that's right. That was one thing I want to touch on. I was going to bring that personal, like that first interaction that we talked about. It was, that was a great learning opportunity. And then I was like, I need to meet them personally. They need to see me.
Yeah.
And then we have a connection. And then you can see, contrary to some of the things that were said, I'm not this mean guy. I'm not. I actually care about you, believe it or not. Let's talk. And after, I remember I brought my first speech physically. They called on my name, and I remember thinking to myself, you know what? I typed up a speech. And as I was walking up to the podium, I was like, I need to let them know that I appreciate the time they spend here. I appreciate the sacrifice, and I appreciate what they're doing. And I can't separate what they do from them. I appreciate them, and I do. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to add that. We're just going to sprinkle that on the front and on the end because that's the truth. And I think they need to hear that from me in particular. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, first thing out of my mouth was, I want to start by saying I appreciate you and I appreciate your time. And I don't remember exactly what I said. It's on public record.
I remember the basic, yeah.
And I was like,
it's on YouTube.
Yeah, right? Yeah. I was like, I appreciate you. And I looked at everybody. I tried to look everybody in the eyes. I was like, I appreciate you. Mm-hmm. And I want you to see that I mean that. Like, look at me. You can see it. Mm-hmm. And then I started. I went through the spiel, blah. And then we get to the end, and I said, again, I really want to reemphasize, I really appreciate the time you spend here. I appreciate what you do. I appreciate you. So there you go. And then I left. And after the council meeting, I thought, well, for what it's worth, I was able to say that. And a few of them, I don't remember who, and I won't. And even if I did, I wouldn't. I don't know. But they afterwards, they came up to me like, we really appreciate you coming.
Yeah.
Thank you for speaking. I was like, okay. All right, cool. Okay. We just brought humanity back in.
Exactly.
Now we can discuss.
Yeah. I mean, it's not just about, it's civic engagement, but it's civil engagement as well is the other thing. And we get so little of that. Yeah. One thing that stood out with your comments when you would, speak to the city council or address an issue is, again, that expression of appreciation for their time and their service. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing was focusing more on issues and the principles, underpinning your point of view. Yeah. More than accusations. Yes. And fiery rhetoric and accusing people of criminal behavior or un-Americanism or whatever it might be. You know.
I was like, it is very important to me that these people do not feel like I am coming at them. That's just.
I'm sure it's the same way when they get an email from somebody that's just nasty.
Exclamation points, all caps.
Yeah, and the same thing, in person, and we didn't really have so much extreme comments in our city council, but there are some city councils around the nation where people were very hostile. Yeah. And when somebody comes, you've never met them, they come up and, as a city council, you're stuck in that chair.
Yep.
You can't necessarily get up and leave.
And you can't reply to the person who is addressing you as well. So you just kind of have to sit there
and take it
and let it wash over you and say, thank you for your comments.
Yeah.
But when they come at you with all caps exclamation point, you're naturally going to shut down. Like there's a part of you inside that you're like, I can't
that
it
wall
makes it
goes
hard
up,
to
right?
We all
listen.
have a defense mechanism.
Yeah. And so it doesn't help to come straight out of the gate, firing away.
Well, and that doesn't convey your intent. It didn't convey mine, I should say.
Yeah.
Again, I care about you. I mean that.
And that's going to make
and I appreciate
people listen and hopefully connect to your heart that you're there to let them know, maybe how you feel.
Yeah.
And then, the analytical side, here's some things to, consider.
The principles are the starting point for me. But also I care about you. There you go.
Okay, so we're going to go back to that question, the public health question.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
I can tie it to this. You're now up there, and you've got people saying, please don't implement a mask mandate. And even people like you that say, maybe that's not constitutional. Maybe that's not, not the role of the government, whether or not you legally can do it or not.
Yeah.
And then you maybe have doctors or nurses that are saying, please do this, and you're putting yourself in that role. Mm-hmm. How do you react to that? And then you've got both sides pulling on you, we need to shut down non-essential businesses and maybe implement a mask mandate.
Yeah, I think first pause and listen. Mm-hmm. And make sure that you feel listened to, if I can help that. I can't control you, but at least I can hopefully, by my demeanor and the way I'm sitting and the way I speak or just look at you for that matter.
Yeah.
I really want you to feel listened to, or heard, I should say.
Yeah.
I want you to feel heard. And then I'll think. I'll mull it over. I'll go back to the principles. And then I'll consider your point of view, and I'll consider your principles. And then I'll look at all of the principles, and I start weighing them all out. And you consider everything. Now, with this in particular, it's now happened. It's easy for me to say there's no scenario I would consider a mask mandate, period. Not an option in my book.
Okay.
That said, even if someone came to me and said, I want a mask mandate, okay, I want to make sure you feel heard, okay? That's still important because you may not have said that yet. Someone said it for you. I don't know. I just got to make sure you feel heard. I got to make sure that you know that I care, because now we're breaching the gap here. Now we're being neighbors. Now we're communicating.
Yeah.
Now I might learn from you. You could change my mind on things.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be hard pressed to do so when it comes to personal liberties.
Yeah.
I don't know how you could, to be perfectly honest, but I just have to make sure that you feel heard. That's my goal.
So
okay?
in that scenario, you're the one of 5.
Mm-hmm.
The other 4 seem to indicate they're for it, and so you have no qualms about, I'm a be that no vote, even though it may not change anything.
To me, the way I see it, it's coming from a principled standpoint, right? And it's not to say that yours isn't.
Sure.
I don't want to say that.
Yeah.
The reality is it is. You have principles.
Mm-hmm.
I have principles. I got to consider those. But if I start giving up on my principles, I'm not a man of integrity anymore.
Okay.
I can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. I will start becoming a double-minded man, and losing who I am, and Marc Trotter might on the inside start to die.
Which is the idea, if somebody's voted for you, that they're voting for you because you're going to stick to those principles.
Yeah.
So that's really the idea, is that when they're voting for you, they're voting for, because there are 2 different thoughts of this on this, right? Some people say, okay, well, the public votes for you to do their will, do their bidding,
Mm-hmm.
basically. So, I mean, and we've had even city councilors who are like, hey, I'm going to, as they say, dance with the ones that brought me,
Yeah.
And, so their supporters would have these really strong perspectives, and they would feel obligated to come represent and advocate for those perspectives because they feel like these are the people who elected me. These are the people I represent.
Yeah.
Then there are others who say the people chose me with the idea that they trust me and that they trust my judgment, and I'm going to exercise my best judgment on their behalf. But I'm not necessarily going to ask them how I should vote.
Right.
So where do you fall on that?
My perspective is, hopefully I do a good job of communicating my principles to you. Hopefully I help you understand that I mean it when I, like Jefferson, say I prefer a dangerous liberty to a peaceful slavery. Hopefully you can grasp that, and hopefully, when I say, like James Madison, the government's primary purpose is to secure your property, secure your rights, regardless of what the different camps think.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm doing that.
Okay, so it sounds to me like, then, just to be very clear,
Yes,
that you are saying that if someone votes for you, if you are elected, that you have been elected with the knowledge that this is your perspective, these are the principles that you're going to operate on, and that people are basically saying that they're okay with that, and they're going to accept that you are going to exercise your best judgment when viewing everything through that sort of lens.
Yeah, basically. That doesn't mean I still want to make sure you're heard, because I could learn. I don't want to not consider all the data, right? I have to. But usually my starting point will be from those principles. That's my starting point. Would likely be my end point.
Got it. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. No, that
Yeah.
makes perfect
No,
sense.
I like it.
Okay. Well, I think, we covered a lot of stuff. This was a wide-ranging conversation.
All over the place.
And we went deep.
Oh, yeah.
And that's
good.
And that was the goal of this, man. I so appreciate your time.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you coming on here. I know early on when we're, every day checking if somebody was going to run, of course, the incumbent, announced before the filing period.
Yeah.
And I was like, really, after this whole past 2 years, nobody is going to throw their hat in the ring.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you did.
Okay.
For one, it gives us a podcast to do.
Yeah.
And
Thanks, Mark.
You're welcome.
And no, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time. Yep.
Great,
And well, to help, where can people find more about your campaign and connect with you?
Right now I have a Facebook page, Marc Trotter, Stillwater Mayor.
Okay.
You can connect with me there. And I will respond. So there you go.
Very cool. Thanks again to Work It for sponsoring this series. For more information about Studio Stillwater and how you can help support our mission as a listener or sponsor, go to studiostillwater.net. There you can sign up for emails, get a free sticker, or send us a message. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.